Colin Buchanan, so thank you so much for joining us on the Upside Down People podcast on this fine day today. How are you going?
Caleb, I'm very well, and hello, Jared. And it's very good of you to have me along. At last, I feel like I qualify. Upside down, people.
You made it. You made it. You're an upside down person.
I feel like I'm amongst people who understand me at last.
That is awesome. We've recently been having a few conversations around the topic of identity. So a question that I have straight off the bat for you in terms of how you would define yourself. So people might define you as a white Australian, a country singer, a kids singer, someone who is passionate about the gospel and puts that in the creative form of kids' music. But how would Colin define himself?
Wow. You've started with a really easy one there.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be serious. Just what's the first three words that come into your head?
Colin is Colin.
I love it.
Which is, I think, I wonder if it's another way, whether I would only be restating the question if to think that I tend to think of the view from the inside more than the view from the outside, if that makes sense personally.
Yeah, so what is the view from the inside?
Yeah, and the view from the inside is always the long story, isn't it? It's I'll often use the term "the view from the inside" when it comes to aging. That the view from the inside doesn't tend to change quite so much. So it's not so hard for and I wonder if you feel the same. That it's not hard to jump in the time machine and head back to when you're 5 or 7 or that's not such a hard thing to do, and that's sort of the long story of whereas of who you are, and that shapes who you are. And it's not like I don't care what people think at all. There's lots of different levels. I suppose the great thing about following Jesus Christ is that you know that you're known in a way that even you don't know yourself. And there's a great security in that, because you meet the Noah, if you like, not Noah, the man who built the ark, the great Noah, Knower. You meet him in grace, and love. And I suppose that's the thought, that the challenge with your own identity is that it can be misconceived, and it can be it can be overblown, it can be underblown. It can, the view from the inside has its own distortions, and the view from the outside is incomplete, because we know that we're able to create an impression that, a good or bad impression. And that whole notion of people look on the outside, but God looks at the heart, suggests that whatever I understand my identity to be, I have a reference point, and not to say that I have absolute knowledge of my own identity, but I know that God does. And so I guess you're always sort of wanting to measure yourself, the fraughtness of your own view and others' view, and sort of want to. So that's not 3 words.
It's a great answer, though. It's a very good answer, Colin. And maybe you can give us a little bit more of an idea as to what Colin Buchanan does in his spare time. Because I think a lot of people, they think Colin Buchanan is the musician. Does he just strum his guitar in his spare time? Does he just sing to his own kids? But if you've got, say, a Saturday afternoon free, are you on the guitar like writing your latest song, or are you up to something else?
Yeah, well, if it's Saturday afternoon, I'll just make sure that there aren't any jobs to be done. My wife she's pretty good job maker.
Runs a tight ship.
Yeah. And you want to get the jobs done, it's like, but no, I love I love a little bit of freestyle space where, and I'm a mixture of, I really should have used that time better guy. And also I like not planning, having spaces of time that are unplanned, which means you can find your way into a book. Probably a book is the thing, or go for a walk, or go, actually, I feel like going for a bike ride, So I do love that, or, playing guitar. I do find that songwriting is something that, that I've never really had a pattern to it. But in the last couple of years, I found myself reading the Bible in the morning. I'd say the last 5 or 6 years, I've been, sort of rediscovered just that daily discipline of reading. Might even be longer than that, which is really nice, going to the Bible. And I find that's a great leap off point for songwriting. And so I can find myself starting the day, and then it's 11 o'clock, and it's like I haven't been wasting my time. I've just been down the creative rabbit hole, so which is really lovely to do.
That's such a tricky thing to try and put a value to that creative process, to try and figure that one out. Is that something that you try and put a metric to, or how have you done that over the years?
Well, I'm not terrific at the pinning it down to the metrics. I'm not a great quantitative guy, so I'm really grateful that I've been able to make a living, and here I am now. And I think, wow, we've raised a family, and we've got a home, and we got good cars, and we've been able to travel, and like my son lives in the UK, so we need to go over there, and we've had the means to do that. And
awesome.
But I'm really grateful, because I'm not very good at the business side of things, and it doesn't sort of excite me. But I also no one likes financial pressure. And well, it's not entirely, I mean, a lot of people write great stuff, not just songwriters, but a lot of people create under pressure, and a lot of people create in difficult times. So hardship doesn't necessarily equate to, creative constriction, if you like. But I'm grateful that I've had space to be able to, create, because it does take time. And if I guess ultimately, if you had to go out and have a day job, well, that's just time that you don't get to sit and think, that little, piece of scripture, that idea out of that would make a really good song, or would it? So let's chase that one down and find, it's I think that's a children's song, although the idea is not particularly childish, or it might be a grown-up song, or a story song, a country song, or something like that. So so I'm not too hard and fast, and I'm very grateful that I have my seasons of doing gigs and traveling, and I'm really grateful too for collaborations that I've had with people as well. So
well, on the back of that, Colin, just interested to hear a little bit more about your musical journey, because a lot of people probably know you now as this kids Christian musician. You do a lot of these kids Christian concerts, but some people know you as a country musician. Some people will also be maybe more familiar with you as a play school host. So tell us about that journey, how it all started, Did you always have a knack for music, or did that develop later on in life?
Well, I did get sent from my music class. I did elective music, and with no particular, training, extracurricular training, and really, yeah, I think I didn't vastly improve over the period of those years, but I was sent from the room by the teacher. Get out of here, Colin Buchanan. I do not know what will become of you. And
really?
She wasn't saying musically, she was saying just generally. And
right. What did you do? Tell us a quick snippet to that moment.
Well, I went out of the classroom because I was an obedient, albeit just disruptive student. And then I hoped that Mr. Ash,
if you're listening, Mr. Ash.
Yeah, I hope that he didn't happen to be walking the corridors, sweeping the miscreants, and because I thought that would spell trouble. Thankfully, Mr. Ash did not turn me to ash.
You're quite the mischievous young fella.
So music and I didn't really connect, and I didn't train at home. I always liked just singing in the garden as a kid, and we had a bunch of records, not a lot, and my dad loved music. I think my mum and dad loved music, but not sort of constantly. Dad loved classical music, and I still enjoy listening to classical music. I think picked that up from him, and mum, I think, always loved. She was a poet herself, and she a lover of words, big Scrabble fan. So she would always, and she liked limericks, and so if there was a funny song, a song with a twist, Noel Coward would have these sort of toffee English comedy songs, and she'd take great delight in that. So I think I picked that side up, that words can deliver they can deliver joy and fun and delight. And then Dad's loving these melodies that he would hum along to and sing along to from Mozart and Strauss and the like. So this is an interesting crossover. And when I first heard James Taylor, I remember where I was at a party at the high school, and it was like this sort of, the clouds parted and the light shone down. It was like, and I walked over to the record player in slow motion, and sort of picked up the cover of his white greatest hits record, and thought, what is this? The sound of the acoustic guitar and the way that those words wrap themselves around that whole thing was just so beautiful and inspiring and arresting. And so I've been an appetite-driven musician. My training is minimal to almost non-existent, and I'm a lover of words, and so that's really. But that said, I trained as a primary school teacher. I'd make up songs. Learned to play guitar in church and Sunday school, so that was sort of an overlap. And interestingly, I feel like one of the greatest songwriting resources that I've had over the years is singing hymns from my very earliest years, and because the structure of hymns is so. And when they really sing, they have poetry and they have singability, they have consistency, and they're songs that pull you out of. Well, they pull great melodies and great thoughts out of the people who are singing them, and they pull you into things that are, transcendent. And so they're remarkable pieces of musical work, just purely aside from the notion of how you might understand them as a believer. And so I love singer-songwriters and all these other bits mushed around. And then my wife and I headed to Bourke in Western New South Wales to live in a little Christian community, and that was really just to pull out of Sydney and our familiar sort of conservative evangelical world. Right. We weren't forsaking our say Reformed theological heritage. That was something that we really valued, but we were sort of looking for just to put legs onto our faith in a bit more of practical sort of way. And we found that there. That was a really great thing. It was called Cornerstone Community.
What did that look like? Do you mind unpacking that a bit?
Well, in terms of what it physically looked like, it would look like a bunch of buildings out in the out on the flat red bits of Australia.
Yeah, right.
In terms of spiritually, it was quite a mixed bag of people. Like some people went there because they were still on the sort of quest, the spiritual journey they were uncertain and a bit perhaps still searching to some degree. I think everyone would have said they were Christians, but and whereas Robin and I, were looking at some sort of theological, education, but we just sort of didn't want to just feed the familiar, in a sense, culturally speaking, and I think we felt some gaps, and we wanted to sort of backfill those, not sort of further fortify the things that have been strengths of the conservative evangelical world that we'd been part of, which we are to this day very grateful for and very much part of still. And so there was a thing written on the back of the bus: let your natural life be spiritual and your spiritual life be natural. It's a pretty old bus too, as an old Austin, and which didn't run all the time. But let your natural life be spiritual and your spiritual life be natural, which is not a biblical phrase, and it's quite easily appropriated by people who wouldn't be Christians. But it was a good summary of what we wanted to sort of build into our lives. And so it's 20 of us, and we were the only married couple in the year group that was there. And we'd work half the day, and that way there were no fees to speak of. And so I would work there was a tiny little 9-kid primary school there, 9 student. And that in itself was lovely because I'd make up songs about them and read books to them and
love that, yeah.
do as little maths as possible. And
well played.
Yeah. And but I found that I started writing songs, and again, this was just the stories really captured me, and I just wanted to turn those into words, and sing them. And I'd written kids songs. Some of my kids songs I'd written that I went on to record, I'd written before I went there. But as a teacher, I wasn't a songwriter, professionally. And so I started amassing these story songs about where we were living, and which were more as a journal exercise. And there were songwriters, Aussie songwriters and bands that I just really loved that would do that. And so I was seeking to sort of emulate that that sort of thing, right? It was like a musical photo album, a musical storybook. Yeah. And some people, I recorded some onto cassettes. Just not again.
You might have to describe what those are for.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't want to be disrespectful, but you must be old.
Yeah. Well, I a number of my friends, in the community. So we're talking sales, successful sales of up to 20 units, because that's how many people in the community. But they said, I played some of the songs to them. I said, I would like to listen to them while we're on the tractor or whatever. So there was a barbecue, and I recorded. I set up my microphone and recorded onto a cassette deck, and then a friend had a cassette to cassette. Wow. So he was able to copy these up, and I photocopied a little cover, and so my friends were able to listen to those on the tractor. And
so is that where it began?
Well, at the end of the year, some friends said, they have a country music festival in Tamworth. You should enter it. And it's like, they didn't know very much about it, and I knew even less. So I rang the Tourist Information Centre and entered one of the Talent Quest songwriting. I sent 3 songs in, and they said, "Oh, we like those songs. Come and perform them." And so I was in the finals of the songwriting contest. And a friend of mine from Wollongong in New South Wales, one of my old friends, said, "It sounds a little to me like the Chook Raffle." It was,
right?
Yeah. You do need friends like that. Yeah, it wasn't wasn't exactly the Grammys, you know. It wasn't. And from there, you know, it was like all beer and Skittles, you know. It was not at all. But I did win that little talent quest, and so it was encouraging because it was an introduction to the country music scene. It was like, oh, there are people writing, you know, and it was a huge diversity of performers.
Did it give you like a glimmer of hope or the potential possibility of what could be at that stage?
Well, the really nice thing about, you know, and it does sort of swing back to your identity, because I've had a lot of people whose, you know, identity and their dream of music have been very, you know, and I wouldn't say that, you know, mine are clinically separated, I suppose, but that's a very fundamental identity that they've had. Whereas I suppose Robin and I were trying to sort of sort out a Christian identity in a sense, not sort it out, but just consolidate it and spend time considering it. And when we were thinking about going to Burke, I was challenged to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And it was Laurie McIntosh who started the community. And he wasn't bending my arm. He just said, well, you could sort of look at this opportunity in that way and say, okay, I'm going to seek first the kingdom of God by coming here, you know, and let's not say there weren't other options that we could have had in our lives that were legitimate. But that was the doorway into the beginnings of music. And that's quite a profound path, because my overarching dream, you know, wasn't just to, you know, I sort of thought I'd return back to Sydney. Actually, after being in the Christian community, I thought maybe I'd get into, I don't know, kids or youthy sort of stuff, or, you know, but, you know, maybe I'd return to teaching. But it was like the Lord was opening the doors to music. And you know, I guess it takes a certain level of belief and drive and motivation to walk through those doors, because they, you know, it's not like you don't just arrive. You've got to work really hard in it. But just to this day, you know, everything, the path through which everything I've done since, it passed through that little archway that said, seek first the kingdom of God. So that's a great sort of leveler. That thought, and the thought that the Lord opens the doors, meant that it's been quite a wonderful journey. But that's, you know, that's sort of the reference point.
Yeah,
very cool. Hey, Colin, I've got a 5-month-old daughter at the moment, and I know she's going to grow up listening to Colin Buchanan, right? And I've got a lot of friends at work that have got young families, and a lot of friends outside of work who currently have young families. And I hear a lot of the time them talking about how their kids are growing up or have grown up listening to Colin Buchanan. And their little kids will jump in the car and they'll be like, what do you want to listen to? And they're like, Colin, give me Colin. And obviously you have been so formative for a lot of children and young families and their faith journey, and then hearing the truths of the gospel. And that has become such a part of their childhood experience, and very influential for a lot of young Christian families. How does that sit with you, that influence that you've been able to have for a lot of young Christian families?
I'd say, yeah, I mean, you put it like that. It's oh my goodness. But it sort of doesn't. I mean, it's a delight and a great privilege. And I suppose yeah, there's a few ways into that. I mean, when I got into music, our family, I was signing to a publisher. The doors opened to sign to a publisher, again via a cassette, and we had our first child, Elliot, in the same year, 1990. So you know, family life overlapped with getting into music, and I'd been writing and performing songs not performing, but sharing songs with kids in church and Sunday school. And I've worked in a couple of Christian schools. I'm very grateful for Christian education and Christian schooling, and I loved participating in it, and then loved that my kids were able to attend Christian schools as well. And so the relationship between, you know, songs about the Lord and kids was very much in that sort of teaching way. And there's a thing about a lot of my kids' songs that they are in a sense quite didactic. They're propositional. A lot of them, most of them are propositional as opposed to appropriating, you know. So that, say 1098 God is great as a statement, as opposed, or Jesus rocks the world, as opposed to God, you are so great, or I think you're great. You know, that's that sort of position in the lyrics, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just I was sort of writing these songs that I thought, let's build the knowledge of the things of the Lord through these songs, and I've just never sort of that instinct is it's just like the raw material. It's like I've just kept digging them up, you know, like out of scripture, and just I don't know. That's just like I got trees behind my house, and I don't know if you found that you could make the trees into spoons, wooden spoons. I just found I kept making spoons, you know, like it's there's some, yeah, it's like there's so much material, and that's found that, you know, out of the scriptures, and I've loved making these songs in that way. And, you know, if anything, I'd say that perhaps that's a bit of a shortcoming, that if you really wanted to express sort of that appropriation or worship in out of a kid's song, perhaps my music's not the best place to go for that, you know, just at the moment at least. And I've thought about sort of addressing that, but that does mean that I've come to songs thinking, what can I learn, what can be taught through this song? And the best way to teach is to learn first. And so, yeah, that's why reading the Bible for myself, I don't go to the Bible to, okay, now what can I dig out of this to pass on to someone? There, it's gone. But you want it to pass through your own heart and find out what God has, you know, for me to learn out of it. And so the vast majority of songs have, you know, they've come out of very non-kiddie sort of things, like daily Bible reading for my own, you know, edification, or reading books, or listening to sermons, or being in church and, you know, listening to sermons. And so I love that they've connected, and I think it's a great privilege to be part of family life at any level. You know, I think the Wiggles are privileged to be part of people's childhood, a positive part of kids' childhoods and family life and memories. And it's so powerful, you know, if you've seen those little videos of the Wiggles walking out at rock, you know, festivals, and people going bananas for them. And it's because there's been goodness in that, you know. That's to be a treasured positive memory of childhood is a great privilege, and to have those memories is no small thing, and many children in the world don't have that. And so that's special in itself. And then to be able to sort of stand alongside Christian parents, and I mean, in a sense, you stand alongside them as wanting to help them, you know, and help their kids understand the things of the Lord. But you stand alongside them as a learner as well. And in some ways, you stand with them as a teacher, because, you know, some people have learned a lot from just listening to songs, and that's a real delight as well. And there's a gravity to that I really has never been lost, I hope, on me. Say, like Isaiah 53:6, we all like sheep have gone astray, ba ba do ba ba. And I remember I wrote that, and a friend of mine was like, the Chook Raffle friend, actually, he said,
yeah, what was his thoughts on it? I'm really hear this.
he said, "Ooh, is that a little bit? That's a pretty heavy verse. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. It's about the depravity of man, the person kind.
Right.
And each of us turned his own way, and the Lord is laid on him. So Jesus, the iniquity of us all. So it sort of passes through the depravity of the human condition, and it passes through the sacrifice of God's own Son, and the substitution of Him on our behalf. And so it's sort of, it lands right in the center of hope, but it gets there through the blood and the darkness. And so it's a potent verse, and it's really helpful. Like, that was one of the first kids sort of songs I wrote. Memory verse, but it's helpful to have that heritage of, hey, we want to be careful here. And I decided that I think if it lodged that verse, which is a really incredible gospel encapsulation, if it lodged that in kids' lives, then I think it would serve kids well, even though it is, people say we can't read the Bible without a church, without people going, bah, bah, do, bah, bah. And I get that, but it is a remarkable verse, and there's gravity to it. So that, yeah, even though I have a lot of fun, and there's some, there's levity in the sort of in the vehicles very often, but I take the content very seriously, and I think and the Bible, sort of says you better take this content seriously. The stakes are high, especially if you're going to speak what purports to be truth to little tender hearts who you don't want to lead them astray.
Yeah.
And
it's clear, and there's no doubt that you've had like a real positive impact on so many thousands of lives. Jared's going to hate me for saying this as well. Actually, he probably won't. He'll probably laugh. To the point of even some of our wives, no names mentioned, they had quite large crushes on you as well.
Caleb, you said you wouldn't bring this up.
Yeah, I think it's Jared's wife who's going to say that's.
Yeah.
I'm in serious trouble, mate, after this.
But yeah, you have had such a positive impact, not just kids really being drawn to your charisma and personality and just the life that you bring onto stage and attracted to that, but also kids being drawn into what you're saying, that gospel message of hope, of redemption, of truth, that you bring into those songs. And I think something that I've tried to think of, like, how important do you think that is to have that for children? Because I think it's so important. And having a child of my own who's also she's 1 year old, so she's getting right into the kids' music and that sort of thing. And it's a part of me has had to what would I say? I've had to sacrifice a part of me because I'm like, oh no, you'll listen to the music that I like, and but in terms of that, there needs to be this submission to, well, she learns a different way as well, and there's rhythms and routines and things that, as a developing child, that's so important. How do you take all of that into consideration as you create this music that's so impactful on children's lives? I don't understand how it works, but it works. It's very clear that children are learning the gospel message through your music.
Yeah, it's I do think just being a learner is really foundational to being a teacher, and I think, I suppose it's a cliche, isn't it? Lifelong learner, but it's a good thing to, there's something quite beautiful about people who you think perhaps don't look like they have the need to learn anything, being willing to learn and being willing to learn at the hands of anyone who'll teach them. But music's a really, it's a funny, it's a mysterious thing. It is a powerful thing. Paul Kelly, the singer-songwriter, received an award that I witnessed him being presented, an APRA award. So it was a lifetime achievement for his songwriting. And his very succinct and eloquent speech of acceptance included something along the lines of, "I don't know how to write a good song. If I did, they'd all be good." And, so music has a way of humbling you. It's not. You don't know if it'll be. I've written a lot of memory verses, but say Isaiah 53:6. It's just one that people have just latched onto, and I don't know why. Because why is Baba Do Baba more memorable than Hoocha 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 Cha? or whatever whatever it might be. This because I suppose in terms of the mechanics of it, you're thinking, well, there needs to be a gimmick here, in some way to sort of make this, attractive and memorable. Unless the gimmick is lots of words, and sometimes it is, that you just put lots of words in and it sounds, and maybe in a funny voice, but other times it's like, no, well, it can't have too many words, and it's got to say one thing. This song is only going to say one thing, and then you can sort of play around that one thing that you're trying to say. Like I've got a song just thinking of that. The baddest sickness in the world is sin. And it was fun to sort of create this mad professor, doctor sort of persona for that song. And it's sort of raucous and chaotic, even in its, just in its delivery and performance in the studio. Yeah. But really, it's like, that's sort of the guts of the song. There are a lot of words in the song, but that's really the guts. So I'm able to sort of play around, and some of those words, it's like you go digging around. You go, the Bible's prognosis, sin's our diagnosis. We're all in this position. We need the great physician. His wonderful salvation is our one inoculation. Like, is a 4-year-old going to pick that up?
That's brilliant. Yeah,
they all know the word inoculation now. A bunch of 4-year-olds.
Yeah, that's right. They do. But it's so it's nice to and I haven't really sort of thought about it in this way, but if you can have a singular idea in a song and then sort of, maybe it's almost like Easter eggs, in terms of content, like they're not novelty content, but if you sort of ponder it, then you can sort of sink deeper into the song. And other songs, they don't go, they're sort of quite singular. And it's like, that's all right, because I'll write a song about that. And I think conservative, theologically conservative people tend to want to say it all and not make a mistake. And so, but it's like, I think, I remember hearing one kid's song, I won't say who wrote it or where, but it was just like helping mum and dad with the dishes and Jesus coming back, and he died on the cross. It was like, I was exhausted by the end of it. It was like, and praying to him at night when you can't sleep. Like it was
just giving this little theological routine.
It was like that little pill, where you go, now I don't have to eat for all day. It's that new super pill,
let's go through the whole narrative in 2 minutes.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So, but that said, there's a chant that my daughter does, and I'm not quite sure where she got it from. My son-in-law, and they do it with my 3-year-old grandson. And it's like, God made the world, and it's justice, and they do it in bits, and it's like the full sort of story of the gospel from creation to restoration. Yeah, and it's just a beautiful thing, and it's sort of fun to do. I don't have to do it, and it's
that you enjoy the process. That it's something that you find fun in creating.
And there's something about kids Colin, and you would have observed this better than many of us over the years, but when you take a moment and observe them, they just have this sense of awe and excitement and receptiveness, willingness to learn, this sense of wonder that it seems like us adults, we get old and crusty and we kind of lose that a bit. You know, Jesus commends childlike faith. He says, children come to me. He's always so invitational towards them. How have you witnessed that over your career, and how has that kind of ministered to you, I guess?
Yeah, well, no, I think that's, you know, like if there's one idea in a song, sometimes I feel like the concerts, you know, you could have a little voice in your shoulders saying, well, you know, there's a lot of, what was the point of that bit or that bit? Whereas sort of to trust the content of the songs, to trust sort of the experience, the shared experience and the participation, so that by the end of it, it's like, this has clearly been a God thing. I know it's a bit of a nondescript sort of term, but I remember doing a gig at in Dubbo, and some friends of mine from Cornerstone, the community I mentioned, were there. They were leaders they'd been leaders in it, and they just came along and they sort of stand, you know, 3 or 4, and they're standing up the back while I did a thing for visiting schools, and it was the first time actually I used my dunny blaster.
Okay,
please explain what a dunny blaster is.
Tell us more.
The dunny blaster, I'd had this idea that it'd be fun to blow a roll of toilet paper with a leaf blower, and I've been sort of toying with how would you do this, and you know, scratching my head, and then I'd not done it, but I think I'd bought the bits, you know, from Bunnings, and I thought, okay. And then my kids, I'd been away for a gig, and I came back, and my kids had been to the circus with Robin, and I said, oh, you know, how was it? Oh, it was great. The clown blew toilet paper at us, and it was like, wait, that's my idea. The clown has stolen my idea. I found out it wasn't an entirely original idea, but I went to Dubbo with my leaf blower and, you know, bogged together toilet paper, and I blew toilet paper at the end of the show, and it's all beach balls, and, you know, it's just one other dimension.
Yeah.
And the kids sort of, you know, all jump out of their skin, you know, not out of the skin, but they go bananas, you know, it's as do I. And I'm high-fiving the kids as they all go out and everything. And one of the little, she would have been about year 4. She stopped in front of me and she shut her eyes and she said, I am so happy, like this. And we high-fived and off she went. And my friend Paul said, these kids, they're going to remember this, and they're going to want this for their kids. And he wasn't talking about me, you know, he was talking about once you've experienced something, and I can remember going to a vacation Bible school event that my older sisters had gone to, so I was quite young. I would have been probably infant school maybe, and they had a sort of end of the week thing, and it was full of energy, and, you know, I don't know what the bits and pieces of it was, but I just remember the joy. And in fact, I wrote a song about it, which is not a particularly memorable kid song, but I remember thinking, and I used the phrase, wow, this whole living for God thing, it's right in the middle of the action. That is where the action is. It's like, I didn't remember every little detail of it, but I can remember thinking, this is really profound, this is really good, and it's all about God. Yeah. And there's lots of other good things around me. There's lots of bad things, and this just shines in a certain way. And so, yeah, I love that happens. And Christian families that you're describing, they come to gigs, and then other people come who may not be Christians, or, you know, a bit ambivalent, and it's not just, Colin gets out there and does his thing. It's almost like everyone, you know, these other people bring their sort of intent and their familiarity with the songs and their energy, and so that becomes a sort of swell, and that has an energy that people find themselves just jumping onto. I'm not saying people become Christians, because I don't stand up there and say, okay, now it's time to respond to the gospel. It's not that sort of setting, really. But
hard to do that when you've got a Dunny blaster.
Yes.
Well, you already preach the gospel in like 3/4 of your songs, Colin, so it's not necessary.
Well, it's funny you should say that, because over the years, you know, I went to a guy who's become a dear friend, and he's a wonderful kids minister in the UK. And when I first went to their church, he said, "Oh, now you'll be doing a talk, won't you?" And I said, "I don't usually do talks." I keep the talk really to a minimum, which, having talked to me today, is remarkable. There's very few times in my life where I keep the talk to a minimum, but I feel like a kid show, especially over time, more and more, I felt like, no, you know, as a show, I want it to, you know, zing. You know, it's got to pace itself, but it's got to keep going, and to sort of shut it down. And maybe I'm too sensitive to the thought that if I just stop and start talking, that people, you know, will listen. But when you've got, you know, 1, 2, 3-year-olds there, and, you know, and now I'm getting, you know, teens and parents,
3-year-olds,
as much for the experience. But this friend said, you'll do a talk, and that was an interesting sort of interplay, because we both valued the Bible profoundly, but he felt like you need to do a Bible talk. You need to hold the Bible in your hand and show people that this comes out of the Bible. And I think, you know, it took a while to sort of reconcile that, because it was a little like you just said, Jared. I said, okay, you want to do a talk. By the time you do, let's say you do it in the middle. I've got out there, I've talked about the supremacy of God, that he's the creator. That Jesus, his son, is declared king, and over young and old, and all of creation. I've explained I've sung about the depravity of the human heart, and I wasn't trying to win an argument, but it was like, I know in a song,
what for me?
it was like, there's a lot of content has flown out into the air here. And I don't pretend that everyone's sort of, taking notes for the exam or anything like that. But so it's interesting that whole notion of communication. I do it a particular way. I don't think it's the only way, or it may not be the best way, but there's definitely a fit. And when I mentioned Paul Kelly about music, communication's a bit the same. I think very effective preachers really love preaching. They like it. They like finding things out about God's word. They like, I don't know, they get a charge from what they don't understand and trying to understand it better, and the depths of the nature and character of God. And then they love stepping into the lives of the people who are going to listen. And they love the fact that we use words and the tone of our voice and stories and pace, and it's like, I think but it's hard to know exactly what it is. That you can find two people who seem to be the same on paper, and one just has something that makes their thing land. And
and I think it speaks into the uniqueness that God's sort of placed into each one of us as well. That he's created something within you, and if you're being honest with that and obedient to God with that, then I think there's, without getting super spiritual, but there is a favor. There's like this easiness that comes from it, and not out of this striving or I need to do X, Y, and Z, but it's like, well, the gospel message has been in the songs, and the favors in like, well, extrapolate that over 30 years, and you've got parents who are now instilling these values into these kids, because when they're 4 years old or 5 years old, they they were learning about the good news of God. So yeah, there is that beautifulness to what God's put inside you. I love it.
Caleb, it reminds me of that quote that I'm sure you've heard as well, Colin, but from Chariots of Fire, I think it is Eric Liddell who says, "When I run, I feel God's pleasure." And Colin Buchanan, when you play guitar and sing songs, do you feel God's pleasure?
Well, it's certainly, and it's at multiple levels. It's there's joy in the in the act of doing it because of the way He's made me, and there's joy in the content of what it's achieving, and there's joy in the sharing of it, which is a real delight. And I think the nice thing about 30 years, I'm getting sort of a bit used to saying 30 years, but I think when I started writing these songs, and I've sort of spoken to this a little, it was like, well, I don't want this to be a cruel joke on children that we sort of created this fluff, and I think I don't want to do that with children or with adults for that matter. And some people do it with spiritual things, I suppose, but it's but the thought that you could sort of invest truth by God's grace into these into say these songs, and that could find itself when the novelty of the song sort of falls away, that the truth that I didn't create the truth, and I didn't it's not for me to sustain that truth. It's like that's God's business. So the song falls away, but the truth, shows itself to be enduring and to stand up to the rigors of life. The rigors of life can hit you when you're 9 too. So it's why you got to wait till you're 25 or 30. But and it's nice. It's nice to be able to sort of get in the time machine and speed my way from. In my memory, I sort of think about those times, and then I come to now, and I think, what a blessing that I can see that has happened, and it's not, I just give thanks for that. It's that's a very special thing. And one of my first concerts that I did for Kuron, they said we're going to have a lineup now, and you can meet Colin. And I thought, well, this will be short, because country music. I'd done a lot of sitting all alone on a forlorn on a table, not meeting people after a concert, and this line suddenly appeared, and one of the first mums who spoke to me said, "Yeah, we've had your cassette for a little while again. Cassette. My dad died just last week, and I got in the car, and your cassette was in the car." And I didn't take it out. I just let it play, and it really helped me. Wow. It's just like, okay, when I'm mucking around here, like it's this matters in the same way that I guess we're familiar with Jesus saying, He said, "Let the children come," but he wasn't mucking around. So that's a blessing to have seen. To sort of seek to do that, and then sort of see that happen. And I give thanks to God for that, because that's really he's provided all those raw materials and the capacity to do it. And it is a fit, and it's just nice when there's a fit. And I think rather than sort of like we talked about identity a bit, but you early on, but there's something very affirming about finding just a good thing that's a fit, and that you find joy in, and that other people find joy in. It doesn't mean that you've got to be known by everyone. It's like, because I find it. I wrote a song on Monday about a guitar maker, and I called it "Teaching the Timber to Sing." And this guy, not a believer to my knowledge, but you go into his workshop, and it's just like, this guy is in the right place. You know, he just loves fixing guitars, and he especially loves making guitars, and he loves talking about it. He loves sharing the wonder of the grain, and see that grain, that is going to sound better than this grain because it's got, you know, and mahogany. Oh, mahogany. It's just, you know, and it's like that's a beautiful thing when people find their place, and, and you can sort of celebrate that, and then sort of and then to know who it is who made the wood, and who created the tone and made the possibility, and who worked with wood himself. You know, the thought that Jesus was an apprentice was a thought I had this morning, thrust in my direction. I thought, oh, that's a great cool thought. Yeah, when he got to his hometown, they went, hang on, I know this guy. That was one of those young apprentices. He's a chippy.
Brilliant.
I'm rambling now.
No, I love it. I believe you have a show coming up in WA. That's where we're based. So before, I'd love you to share a bit about that, and maybe you can share the dates and where they'll be. But before you do, one last question that I have is, so you've mentioned a few times you've got your children and raising your children. Was there ever a time where they're like, hey dad, just put the guitar down, we don't want to sing any songs, just give us a break? Or have they been fully committed and devoted to singing along with you through the years?
That's a good
yeah. Well, they have been a wonderful, like a great support and a great leveler, because it's like, like any of us, if you know, if you're a copper, it's like your kids, okay, they might like you being a copper, but they don't want you to be a copper all the time. They want you to play on the floor with them, you know. They want you to be dad, you know, and or mum. And there's a sense in which our kids sort of aren't impressed necessarily by the stuff that might impress other people, because you know, fundamentally, we're mum or dad. And that's true, like throughout our lives. So I feel like that's still true from, you know, my son's just turned 33, my oldest, and youngest is 25, and so they were a great sport. In fact, sometimes we'd say, you know, family devotions could be, you know, it's hard when you're busy, and so we try and give it a go, you know, and we did, you know, okay, I think. But if I pulled out the guitar, it was like the kids just went crazy. It was like, put the guitar away.
That's crazy. Brilliant.
Yeah, it was, you know, it actually, we didn't sit around, so we weren't the Von Trapps, you know, we didn't sort of sit around singing that much. It was especially when they were, you know, when they were younger. But they've been wonderful. It was really fun that season where they could all sing on the albums. Like, I can hear their voices on like 1098 and Jesus Rocks the World. King of Christmas. Yeah, and that's really lovely just to hear them, their voices in that. And they've been hugely supportive, as has Robin, you know. So yeah, I
love it.
Yeah. But it's been really important to just remember your dad first and foremost, you know, and I think that's true for any of us. It's like, I think one of the great things you can do as a parent is stuff you don't have to do. It's nice when people do stuff for you that they don't have to, you know what I mean, have to.
Yeah.
So I would walk them to the bus stop when they were in high school, and not because I was worried about them, but because it was just nice to walk with them in the morning and to make that a part of the rhythm. In fact, when Emily went to university and I walked her down to the station, she's like, "You realize you're still walking me to the station and I'm at uni?" And it's like, yeah. It's nice
sounds like you've got an amazing bond with your children. So I love that. And yeah, so tell us about, just in closing, about your shows coming up in WA.
Yeah.
Well, so I the last couple of years,
Christmas party, right? Is that what it's called?
My big Christmas party.
Yeah. Will there be a Dunny blower?
Yeah, come on.
Dunny Blaster.
Dunny Blaster.
Yes.
So close.
Shame on you. Shame on you, Caleb. I am coming to Perth on Saturday, the 9th of December, 2023. If you happen to be watching this post 2023, gee, we had a terrific time.
It would have been there.
and that's on the Saturday the 9th. And then on Saturday the 10th, I'm looking forward to heading down to Albany, which is
awesome.
And I'm doing it on the ground. So I'm just winding my way down, through the Jarrah.
Through the
forest
there. Beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. Pemberton, down that way. Might even stick my head in at Denmark.
I love Denmark as well. Yeah. So I'd encourage our listeners, if you're wanting to get along, we'll put a link up to grab those tickets in this episode description and on our socials. And Colin, it's been an absolute privilege having a conversation with you. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being such great listeners. And I could talk under wet cement, as they say. So hopefully there's been some value in it.
You definitely are. And we'd love to have another conversation with you sometime after the big Christmas tour, maybe.
Let's do it again, shall we? Yeah. But you're both very generous souls, and so thank you, Caleb, and thank you, Jared. You're doing a great job.
Good on you.